The Kremlin has slammed the doors on Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's request. The Ukrainian president called for a three-way summit with Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin as Kiev scrambles to halt Russia's relentless assault. Moscow's message is blunt. No talks between Putin and Zelensky until negotiators hammer out concrete agreements first. The Kremlin's latest snub follows Putin's outright rejection of a face-to-face with Zelensky in Turkey earlier this month. Russia and Ukraine's first direct peace talks in years. Zelensky is sounding the alarm. Russia has amassed 50,000 troops, its most battle-hardened unit, on Ukraine's northern border, which is signaling an imminent and potentially devastating new offensive. Ukraine's railway infrastructure also came under heavy fire. Facilities and equipment in the Kharkiv, Donetsk and Sumy regions were targeted. No casualties have been reported. Kiev fears that with the massive troops deployment could be the starting of a summer offensive where Russian troops can target Kharkiv. Ukraine is not backing down. In a bold escalation, Kiev unleashed one of its largest drone attacks yet on Russian soil, striking towns around Moscow and damaging key infrastructure, while no casualties were reported there. The psychological impact is clear. Ukraine is bringing the war to Putin's doorstep. Russia, for its part, unleashed one of its heaviest drone assaults of the war. Ukraine says at least 18 Ukrainians died over the weekend. The cycle of escalation shows no sign of abating. On the diplomatic front, Germany is stepping up. Chancellor Friedrich Merz's government unveiled a massive $5.65 billion military aid package for Ukraine. While Berlin remains tight-lipped about sending Taurus missiles, it has committed to funding the production of long-range weapon systems inside Ukraine. Though Berlin remains tight-lipped about sending the highly coveted Taurus missiles to Ukraine, the potential shift in Germany's stance signals a significant escalation in Europe's involvement in the war, a move that could dramatically shift the balance on the battlefield. Putin is directing his forces to create a buffer zone in the Sumy region, capturing 4 villages. These moves are an alarming reminder of Russia's unwavering commitment to its territorial ambitions, even as Ukraine rallies international support to halt its expansion. Mr. Ron Aledo is a military expert and is now joining us live from Miami, Florida. Hi, Mr. Aledo. Good to see you again, and thank you very much for making time for us. Why is Germany tight-lipped over sending Taurus missiles to Ukraine, even though they have said they fully support Ukraine? What problem will that have on Russia, especially on the Crimean Bridge?
Well, the Taurus missile is a very powerful missile. It's a steel missile that is very hard to detect, and it's more powerful than the Storm Shadows that have been used already in the battle. And this is achieved because the new Chancellor Merz is a very much militant, globalist, neocon, anti-Russia person, very different from Schultz, that was anti-Russian but was a moderate anti-Russian. The new Chancellor Merz is a very radical anti-Russian person because of his political ideology, and now he's shifting the policies of Germany into a very militant, open support for Ukraine. These Taurus missiles, they have very long range, and basically what we saw during the last week, that Ukraine launched hundreds, perhaps over 1,000 drones in direction of Moscow. That is in preparation for the Taurus missiles. What they are trying to do is not to cause a great damage in Moscow with those 1,000 drones that they send. What they are trying to do is to deplete the Russian air defenses, to make them waste their air defenses, their anti-air defenses in those drones. That means that they are going to continue with more hundreds and hundreds of drones because they want to deplete, to make weaker the air defenses of Moscow, so then they can attack Moscow with the Storm Shadow, with the Taurus missiles. That is what we have seen for the last week, all these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of drones that Ukraine launched against Moscow. And what Moscow did in response to that was to bomb drone factories and places where the Ukrainians were building or storing drones. That is the missiles attack that we saw in the last days.
Mr. Aledo, then with all that being said, what do you think is making Putin so adamant and even not budging at all? He's clearly not fazed by the sanctions threat. In fact, the Kremlin says it's all a West rhetoric.
Well, you need to understand that Putin did not want a long war. Putin won a war of 2 weeks. That's why he sent diplomats to Istanbul, Turkey, in March of 2022, 3 years ago. He wanted to end this war in March of 2022 in Istanbul with a direct negotiation, and that's it. But the Western countries, the United States, Europe, they sent over $200 billion in weapons and equipment to Ukraine so they can make this war long, a long war, an attrition war of more than 3 years now. And Russia has suffered a lot of casualties, a lot of equipment loss. They lost ships in the Black Sea fleet. So now Russia is going all for it. Back in March of 2022, Russia have very limited demands. Neutrality for Ukraine, do not become part of NATO, and give freedom to the Ukrainians of the south and the east that are mostly pro-Russian Ukrainian. That's it. But now, after 3 years of suffering and spending money and a lot of casualties, Russia is not going to be happy with that. They want a lot more. They want more regions. They want to have more say into Ukraine and make Ukraine smaller. And they want Odessa. They want more than they demanded back in March. And now they are coming, the West is coming with the Taurus missile. The West is lifting the sanctions, the restrictions on the missile range attacks. So Russia might answer to that. Now Russia might use ICBMs, and they might use the Oresnik missile that is unstoppable. It's a hypersonic missile to counter these Taurus missiles and to counter the Storm Shadow missiles.
All right, Mr. Ron Aledo, it's good to see you. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.